Oh, we have Jordan. Oh, brilliant. Jordan, welcome.
Barely.
Barely.
I'm here.
You are joining a great discussion right now. We're into talking about Star Wars coming out in the late 70s and when it first came out. So you've joined at a really good time.
Love that for me.
Oh, phenomenal. Okay, we were just about to hear from Mark talking about the amazing and weird elements of Star Wars that came out and how he reacted. So, Mark, take it away. Yeah, so what was your first thoughts of seeing those odd things?
Because we'd never seen anything remotely like it, because, as I say, television back in the mid-70s, you know, an exotic-looking monster was a mop head with a snooker ball in the middle, and that was it, you know. There was nothing particularly, you know, technical about it, to that degree anyway, and then Star Wars comes along and everything looks so real. And of course, it's a cliche now, it's so lived in, you know. 2001 looks like every scene they filmed it had been mopped and burnt, you know, brushed down and looked perfect. Star Trek was very different, but Star Wars looked like, you know, Luke walks into the homestead and he's kicking sand around everywhere and it's messy and a bit, you know what I mean? It just had the scuffed on it, which really attracted people, even kids. You know, like we noticed it as kids. And the saying about the playground, you know, you just mentioned about talking about the playground. Now, you know, if you're born in the last, I don't know, since Heir to the Empire, Dark Empire, 91, that sort of era, Star Wars, to me anyway, has been pretty much consistently at a very high level ever since then. You know, and obviously you got your sequel trilogy, rather you got your prequel trilogy and then your sequel trilogy, and you know, it's right up there in the zeitgeist. But Star Wars has never dropped out of that for like I say 40 odd years. But when it came along, then there was no internet. You got one comic a week. You know, the toys took a year. There were so many things that now you don't even think about it. You know, there's going to be 2 or 3 comics come out every Wednesday from Marvel, and you know, Hasbro will make an announcement. StarWars.com every week, and there's constant flow of stuff. Then it was so rare to get stuff. So like you say, when you see Chewie turn up on the screen, everybody wanted that Chewie figure. He was the Greedo, any of those guys, the original 12, you know, any of those characters, as soon as they came, they were gone in a heartbeat. You know, I think my first figure was Death Star Droid. And I think back, I know why I got Death Star because I thought it was, you know. So, it's just how it works.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And as we talk about this, I was just thinking about even that opening couple of shots of the cantina bar, and they do that fantastic pan and like these just interesting shots of 2-3 aliens in each shot, and kind of just show who's in the bar like that. I mean, even for me watching that for the first time, even understanding that, you know, Star Wars is all aliens and new, it's just every shot you go, oh, they look weird, like it was very interesting. And I think in that same vein of what you're saying, there was just such interesting depth into like the style, the art, the sets, and the aliens. So yeah, it would have been such a jarring thing to see in a good way. Jordan, I want to know your thoughts on this. Yes, we're talking about Star Wars, coming out in that period, and obviously we weren't around for that. We weren't in that period. But what do you think when you watch like the original trilogy and think back to how it came out?
I don't know. I don't think about it too hard. Is that weird? Because you know, I wasn't born yet. I'm only like 26 years old. But it's definitely interesting to hear people who were like around, I guess. I don't want to say old because that's disrespectful.
I don't mind.
It's definitely interesting to hear other people's perspectives of like how their lives were changed when Star Wars came out. Because like my dad was like, I was like 13 or something like that. I don't know. He's an old man. And he just was like, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And I'm like, and then, you know, watching it, of course, loving it. I'm like, really? You've never seen anything like it? But then I have to understand that I have like all these other movies to go off of, and they didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you there. I can see how the Star Wars, the original trilogy, has impacted the years on. So if you look at the blockbuster films that followed in the immediate 5-10 years, it definitely kind of what's the word I'm going for? It trampolined the next kind of wave of movies to come out to be kind of out there and blockbuster and try new things. And even a lot of the space stories became popular again. And I think like what you were saying, Mark, is that it can that kind of alien odyssey space sci-fi had kind of died down just a bit. Is that right to say? Just before Star Wars came out?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it had tailed off. I'd say sci-fi in to that degree, to that level, had tailed off. I think the 70s. You got to remember as well. You'd had Vietnam, you'd had Watergate, you'd had all. You had 3-day weeks. You had brownouts and blackouts. It was a pretty grim time. The chase for the moon had kind of finished in 73, so there was no aspiration. The 70s was not a particularly colourful. You think of the 60s and 50s and 60s in the UK being kind of grey and drab. The 70s was really grey and drab. And so Star Wars comes along. I mean, I think it's no coincidence that Star Wars and disco basically took off at the same time, because once you get to sort of 76, 77, it feels like you're getting a bit of our mojo back, and the rest of the 70s had a lot more vim and vigor about it. And you get to as I say, you just mentioned the blockbuster era. Spielberg's coming up at the same time. He's hit with Jaws rather than Lucas has Star Wars, and then Close Encounters is a massive hit the same year as Star Wars. And there's a couple of wobbles along the way. American Graffiti 2, 1941. But then once you get to 1980, Empire, Raiders, E.T., you're off to the races. And that whole Spielberg Lucas era of the 80s was just something else. And really it did come to a huge degree from Star Wars, because John Williams, he'd already won Oscars before he did Star Wars, for goodness sake. I think he won 2 or 3 Oscars before he even did Star Wars. But that really established him as the guy, right up there with Goldsmith and those people. ILM had come out of nowhere, and then they're the premier effects team for the next sort of 20 years. It was really was next level stuff.
If we start to kind of flow on from that timeline, like we're talking about, because we had, can't calculate, 15 years before the ideas and the kind of the movement for the prequel movies to start coming up, started to begin. So if we keep moving along that pattern and we arrive at the prequels, which was, so I think, Jordan, you were I can't do that maths. You were alive for the prequels. You were around for the prequels.
Yes,
I was kind of born right at Phantom Menace period. Yeah, so kind of us being born in that period. Because there was a lot of why did you wait so long, and why did it kind of take so long to get into this next part of the story, to continue Star Wars? It was so successful. It took a while, but in kind of thinking about it in a long-term perspective, it's it did make these different generations. It did actually kind of make Star Wars sustain for longer, because we've got literally the kids are being born from the original trilogy fans into this new trilogy of new for new fans, which is very satisfying for us being born in it. But let's talk a little bit about the reception of the prequel movies, because this is where in my opinion, Star Wars gets that rap of being can be quite a negative fandom and have those divisive ideas and kind of start to really not like certain characters, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But Jordan, I'm going to throw this to you because I've put Mark in the deep end too many times today. Jordan, I'll go with you first. Prequels coming out whenever you first saw them, how did you receive them?
I loved them. They were just amazing to me. I saw Revenge of the Sith first, so it was kind of jarring to watch the last movie and wait, what the actual hell is happening? But that was sort of my experience. I was confused, but also thoroughly impressed, and I was wait, I need to go back and watch everything else because this is amazing. My favorite thing to say about sequel movies is everyone loves to hate them until it's time to talk about the sequel trilogy. So,
do you mean the prequels? Your favorite thing to say about the prequels?
yes, my favorite thing to say about the prequels is everyone loves to hate them until it's time to talk about the sequels.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So,
that's such a and it's that thing
I was just going to say, and the reason I say that is because everyone loves to talk about how much they hate Jar Jar Binks and how cringy Padme's lines were and how cringy young Anakin was and blah, blah, blah. But then those same people turn around and are like, I hate Rey. Anakin was pretty great and so was Jar Jar. It's like, okay, guys, calm down.
Yeah, it's just like a cycle. And if we talk about like specifically what the prequel movies did to that era, if we think about like watching all the behind the scenes and the making of those prequel movies, green screens coming in and that, the kind of boom in technology coming out and George using that so generously, that started like a whole new wave of the use of green screens and how that was utilized in those movies. So I think going from a big jump from the 80s up until 99 when Phantom came out, like it kind of needed that time for technologies to kind of speed up for what George wanted to put on our screens. Mark, what do you think about this? When the prequels came out, how do you think it impacted the existing Star Wars fans and then to bring in the new Star Wars fans?
How long have you got? That's a big question.
We have 30 minutes.
When Lucas started working on Young Indiana Jones Chronicles and they started testing a lot of the digital backlot and how cheap, because it's still an independent company at that time, how cheap can they make a quality TV show? So that Rick McCullum said it before, that was a real testing ground for what came in Phantom, but that was still 6 or 7 years before Phantom Menace. And famously, George seeing this CGI T-Rex from Jurassic was the moment when he realized, actually we can do this now. Because early 90s, The Abyss in 89, Terminator 2 in 91, all those massive leaps, they did away with I think the last optical thing they did was Always, I think, back in 88 for Spielberg. So after that, digital was sort of hooked going forward. So there's massive changes going on there. The creature shop's gone. Lots of things have changed. It's not until he gets to sort of 94 and he sits down in his office and writes, episode 1, the beginning, and starts working out the storyline, which of course he'd already got notes going back to the 70s. He'd already worked out stuff, that's a very good point from Dominic. They literally have practical effects on the OT, CGI now. Yeah, stagecraft. That's a really good point. But Lucas had to reinvent the wheel to do the prequel because he knew he couldn't have made it in the optical era. It wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. He was building the company. LucasArts, all the stuff he was working on at that point of time, the ranch, it just became his priority. So when he gets to 98 and, they filmed it in 97, the trailer comes out in 98. The reaction was, I think, because if you look at the 90s, you could argue that Star Trek owned the 90s with the golden era of Star Trek. With all the stuff that was going on, the movies were doing great business. So Star Trek really was the powerhouse in the 90s. There was that Star Wars versus Star Trek thing that had been going on since day one because people, you can look at both. But when Star 1 came out, it was so different. I think that was the problem more than anything. It was so different. He wasn't remaking Star Wars. He knew he wasn't going to find another Mark, Carrie, and Harrison. They wanted a generation kind of team of actors. That's not going to happen again. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to remake it. He wanted to do something different. So episode 1 came. I'll admit, I went to Vegas to see it and sat down with my best mate. We went 2-week tour, driving around California, had a great time. Sat in the cinema, and we'd seen The Matrix about 3 days before, which absolutely threw ourselves off. We were not what we saw with The Matrix. And then we saw episode 1 and we walked out. It's like 2 a.m. or whatever it was, walking down the strip back to the hotel. And I just looked at my mate and went, what the was that? Like, what was that? I did not get it. And thankfully, I went to the UK till the July. This was May 19th. So we saw it again, I think 6 more times, something crazy like that. Before we were going to see it again for months. And the second time I was like, actually now I'm starting to get this now.
Yeah.
We were like the biggest cheerleaders ever for Phantom Menace, which is the one film I think improves with age. I think Phantom gets better and better and better over time.
Yes, I completely agree with you there. I think when you think of Star Wars, and especially original trilogy of Star Wars, and then you make that jump to Phantom, it can have that kind of jarring like effect, because it's just such a different feel of a storyline, and we're traveling to so many different worlds quite quickly within one movie. So that kind of the expanse of it was kind of overwhelming in a small way.
As well.
Yeah, it was just one thing after another. Achieve this, go here, that kind of thing. But I'm with you there that I think it's gotten better over age. I think even in my time, like watching it as a kid and thinking, oh, this is a great movie, and then watching it now, I get so thrilled to watch Phantom Menace again. I just think I find it really funny. I don't know if it was, intention, like we have that kind of slapstick comedy of Star Wars, but I find it so funny. And I think it's, we have to kind of look at the movies like we're not critiques of it, to really kind of fully enjoy a movie. We're there we can have our opinions, but we're not there to, be the expert movie critic. Which I think a lot of fans think they are. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now let's talk about this next jump of the next 20 years and the next 15 years, because I know there was a couple of books and some comics, and there's a bit of content between Return of the Jedi to Phantom Menace, but in comparison of Revenge of the Sith to the sequel trilogy, we have a whole bunch of content. We have so much variety in Star Wars media, and it was that's like the boom of where Star Wars diversified into, interestingly, the first Clone Wars animated movie, not doing that well, and then obviously the series of the Clone Wars doing exceedingly well in the early 10s and 2010s, which was interesting. Mark's reaction to Phantom Menace was basically my reaction to The Last Jedi. That's good. But yeah, talking about this period in between, what was kind of what kind of changed, and how did this impact the fandom? Because we talked about how the prequels, weren't necessarily positively received. So how do we think that the animated series and this boom of kind of Star Wars novels and books, how did that impact this generation?
I think after Heir to the Empire, after Dark Empire, which was obviously a comic, that got Star Wars fans used to reading again, because when Star Wars came out, you got the original novel in November 76 or December 76. Then you had Splinters, which nobody's supposed to talk about anymore, and the Han Solo trilogy, which is still my favorite 3 books. Yeah, the Lando trilogy, the novelizations, and that was it until Heir to the Empire, and then that comes out and it's just tremendously successful. So Star Wars fans have got into the rhythm of getting a book every couple of 3 months, and that really did hype up big time for the prequels, because the one thing the prequels did really, really well was Bantam and then Del Rey by the prequel era, and Dark Horse was so on it with content for the prequel trilogy. So, and of course, we had a 3-year gap, which is something I really miss. I wish these sequel trilogy films had a 3-year gap, because it gave the reader and the watcher the time to really digest the film. You had time to extrapolate stuff. Kenner had time, Hasbro had time to release figures. There was really time for that film to have its moment in the spotlight. The one criticism of the current films is that a film's here and gone, out on Disney Plus, and it's gone and in the back rear view mirror way too quickly. The prequel really got it right. So I think even the people who weren't massively inspired or enthused by the films, I think most fans really warmed to Revenge of the Sith. I love Attack of the Clones, and that's the one film more than any of them. And I'm like, no, I could happily watch that film any time of the day. And I've already said how much I love Phantom Menace, so I really dug it. But I like the history and all the what's going on screen and the history of all of that. But I think when you get past Sith, It was the circle is now complete. You know, they were handing out the wristbands at Celebration, going, the circle is now complete. This is it, guys. You've got your 6 films that George promised. That's it. So even though we've been dreaming of episode 7 back in '83 when Jedi finishes with the big celebration, are we ever going to see these guys again? We never really thought we were going to get it. We knew we were going to get 1, 2, and 3. That they were being talked about from the early '90s onwards, and fake fan scripts, Fall of the Republic, and all this stuff were coming out. So we kind of knew it was coming. But once you get to the end of Sith, we're like, okay, that's it. And then they announced the Clone Wars series, CG series. We didn't know we were getting a film initially. That kind of came a little bit after they'd announced the series, and they sort of changed it a little bit. I mean, for me, I was just thrilled we were getting more Star Wars, but I didn't ever expect what has happened to happen. You know, so it was a good time. It was definitely a good time to be a fan. The fandom, you asked about the fandom, really. I mean, the fandom was busy. You know, we didn't have, it was pre-social medias, it's pre-Twitter and Facebook, which was a really great place to be, because you go to StarWars.com, you go on the old official blogs, which was huge.
Yeah.
You were only talking to Star Wars fans who gave a crap and wanted to be there. So your opinion might not jive with their opinion. But generally, I mean, there were some but generally people generally so you know, the three of us could have a completely different opinion, but we'd all explain why we think what we think, how we came to that. And it was all gravy, it was all good. That's kind of lost a little bit nowadays, but it was a good time to be a fan back then. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. And I know, because you and I, Jordan, I think you've experienced it more than me, but that kind of abrasive fan culture that has slowly cultivated over time. Where
that can be a whole episode in and of itself. It's all the BS Jordan deals with for saying he likes the movie.
It's just fascinating that that point you make of, we've lost that charm of having those different opinions of, like, oh, I think this Jedi's better, and no, this Jedi's better. But then talking about it and saying what are the best things and having that discussion, like, that's the charm of Star Wars fans connecting. But now it's like a personal thing. It's like, oh, you don't like that character? Well, you know, it's a very personal thing.
Then that's such a good point, because one of the great things that used to happen back then on the blogs was that, let's say I put an opinion out there. I've thought of something on blah, 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 and I blurt it out and put it out there. And then somebody might come up with a point and go, well, actually, and 9 times out of 10, you'd go, you know, you've kind of changed my mind on this. Actually, I think that was that's how you learn, isn't it? It was a really sweet way of conversing. Plus, I made loads of friends back then. You know, we've pitched a panel for Celebration, basically talking about the old blog, because it was such a cool place to be, and loads of those guys still keep in touch. Now, as like Jordan just said, and you've just said, you put something out there, if people don't like it, wow, are you flamed? Good grief.
That's one F word you could use.
So it's a very different world now. Very different world.
Yeah.
Very different world. Yeah. Jordan, what do you think of this kind of period? Because this is kind of the time where we were, you know, teenagers coming into the Clone Wars and watching Clone Wars and having all this content around us. Tell us about that period for you.
So to be a teenager watching the Clone Wars was to be someone who didn't get on the internet. Love that for me, because I just thought that we were all vibing, and I would talk to my friends in my immediate vicinity about the show and what they loved about it. I have a friend to this day we still talk about. I've known him since like the 7th grade, and we're both like 25 and 26. And we just talk about it and love it. It wasn't until I was able to like get on Tumblr and Facebook and Twitter and realized, okay.
Not everyone loves this. No, that's a really interesting point too, of when you're not in those areas, like, you just think everyone's like enjoying this and having a good time with it.
It's just and I feel like that's just like a small scale of what the fandom deals with, like, in general, because a lot of people who love Star Wars that aren't really on the internet, you know, that make TikToks and put their opinions out there, and now they're being called every slur in the book. It's not fun.
Mm.
And it's just like, it's a jarring experience. But with the bad comes the good, because while y'all are talking all that mess, I'm enjoying everything I can and focusing what I like. And I think that's also a key difference in like fandom culture, is a lot of people in our universe, in the Marvel universe and stuff like that, a lot of people focus on what they don't like.
Yes.
Like, you see Star Wars fans talking about Rey more than any other Rey fan that I've known in my life. They talk about how much they hate her more than I hear people talk about how much they love her, or this, that, and the other. I hear people always talk about how they forced diversity to Star Wars, blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, go talk about the original trilogy or something and leave me alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just go talk about the same three. Go talk about Luke, Leia, and Han for the 85th time, and leave me alone.
We all have those wow moments, and we all come from different contexts and perspectives, and our lives are so different. So we're all going to have different wow moments, but it's for that beautiful conversation of differences that can be really interesting and connect us, where it's not just, hey, we're all of the same mind, we all have the favorite movie, we all have the favorite character. It's about having all those differences. And I think Star Wars is such a good kind of medium for that, because it has so many differences, and it has so many different feelings, different types of characters that different people can relate to. That we can see we often have the discussion of representation, and we've done a lot of discussions on that, and there still needs to be more discussions of representation in Star Wars. But we're seeing more of it, and we're seeing it come into the shows and the storylines. We can even talk about how we were talking about Visions before. That's kind of reaching a new audience, and reaching different parts of the world of styles and medias. So it's about that diversity that can, because it's so different, it can bring us together. That's the thing I like about Star Wars. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And Star Wars, I mean, you go right back to that original film when you walk in the cantina, like you mentioned earlier, and there's that and there's the astronaut next to the Wookiee, next to the big insect guy, next to the wolf, and
insect guy. I love
we're talking aliens, but the point being is that Star Wars by nature is a very diverse community, because you've got first contacts happening every day. There's 250,000 inhabited planets, or whatever, I'm picking a number, crazy amount of inhabited planets, all these species mingling with each other. So diversity, it probably isn't even in their thought process, because everybody's different anyway, so that's the lay of the land in the Star Wars galaxy. Here on Earth, wow, if we were built identical, but I had Star Trek did it best, didn't it? Star Trek's always been the great for the allegories and the comparison.
Star Trek. I'm just kidding. I'm so kidding.
Oh, no, sorry. But you know what I mean? Here on Earth, we'll find something to argue about if there's nothing to argue about. We'll because in the Star Wars galaxy, everybody is unique and different, and a lot of the things that we still as a society have to define, because as a society we've only been around 50,000 years or something like that. We're still figuring it all out, and we're smart enough to know better, but we're generally stupid. In Star Wars, they're thousands of generations past that, so they're the ideal. They're the ideal.
Yeah.
Even though they're always fighting because it's Star Wars, they're fighting. It's political differences. I want their land. I want this. I want the Sith to be better than the Jedi. Whatever. That's why they're fighting. It's not because one guy's this, one woman's that, one alien is this, or whatever. So it is something to pitch for. Be nice if we could.
Yeah. Nice if we could. And on this conversation of we're seeing differences of kind of ideas and concepts coming into these sequel movies, similar to the prequels of how they were received. These sequel movies divided and also kind of unified a lot of fans, I think, in my opinion. There was a lot of differences that came into this movie, expectations and thoughts of what should happen and what didn't happen and what did happen. So let's talk about, I want to know how the sequel trilogy movies impacted the fandom for good or for bad, and what we think of that. And the first thing I want to like say about this is that even with the negativity and even with the differences of how people, we didn't want to see Luke like a grumpy old man, and we you know, those big talking
Get
points.
over it. I'm just kidding. Stop.
You know, people wanting to say those things that they didn't like or did like, and you're having a lot of negative opinions. I think it was actually really important for these movies to be exactly the way they are, because it kind of brought a lot of light into what is wrong with our fandom, and I hope, and I'm seeing a lot more of that conversation come up in you know, Star Wars content creators going, hey, we actually, like, a lot of people are disagreeing in a negative way, in a like violent way, and we need to start changing that. So it kind of brought in this wave of people going, hey, we can have differences and still love Star Wars. Hey, we can, you know, not like a character for a certain reason, but still love Star Wars, and kind of to bring that positivity back into the fandom for it being so negative.
I have the two most perfect guests for if we ever want to deep dive into that from TikTok. They are these dads. They're such dads. And they spend their time on TikTok telling toxic Star Wars fans to calm it the F down.
There you go. Yeah,
it's great.